The Lawyer Who Rocks is brought to you by Hughes Media Law Group. You can visit HMLG at hmlglaw.com. Keep up with the podcast on social media at HMLG Law on all major platforms, and be sure to follow us there. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode of The Lawyer Who Rocks. My name is Joleen Winther Hughes. I am a lawyer who rocks.
When it comes to having your back, there ain't nobody better. This you better believe. Joleen.
I had such a wonderful time chatting with the remarkable gardener Robin Haglund that our conversation had to be 2 whole episodes. The second episode will be out next week, but until then, please enjoy my conversation with her today. One of my very favorite things about doing this podcast is talking with women entrepreneurs in a wide variety of business enterprises. I'm even more excited when I'm able to watch someone grow a business that derives from a personal passion into something magical. My guest today, Robin Haglund, is another one of my Real Networks colleagues who is not only a client, but a friend. And I'm so excited to talk about how she's grown Garden Mentors into a thriving business, educational platform, and media venture. So welcome, Robin. I'm so happy to talk to you today.
I'm thrilled to be here, Joleen. It's so nice to be a part of this with you. And I love seeing how you've grown this program and so many other things. It's inspiring.
I really appreciate that. This is so much fun for me to be able to talk to, everyone. But I want to start at the beginning. Did you originally grow up in the Northwest?
I came here from somewhere else, lots of somewhere else's, sort of East Coast, West Coast girl. I spent a lot of my childhood in all parts of California, so Northern and Southern California, at the beach in LA, on ranches in Northern California, and then also on farms in Virginia. So I have this really diverse background in experiencing life in a lot of different environments, and ended up going to college at UCSB. And after that, moved to the Bay Area. And then I helped some family members move to Seattle. And it was my first experience coming up here. And I got here and the mountains just said, this is where you belong. You have to get here. And it took me a few years, and I'd started working in the internet and, early on, I'll date myself, and moved up finally, and then really started working my way towards Real Networks. That was a big goal for me, to find a way into that business. It took a while, but if you want something badly enough, I truly believe you can make it happen.
I think that we talk about your business now, which is Garden Mentors, but your first part of your career was really rooted in copywriting, print marketing, and those sorts of things. So is that what you wanted to do at first? Is that something that really spoke to you?
So books and gardens, right? Hand in hand, what's the saying? If you have a library and a garden, what else do you need? And books were a big thing when I got out of college. I was an English major the first time through college, and was really fortunate to land a job in Santa Barbara where there are no jobs, and was able to stay there for a while working in a small press. And that gave me an opportunity to really dip my feet into publishing. And from there, moved to the Bay Area, where I worked for multiple publishers. And I loved it. I love books. But I reached a point where I wasn't experiencing books and the content that the books are wonderful about, why you read a book. I was seeing units because I was buying print. And when I realized I was referring to books as units and not books, and not really seeing the author, not really seeing the content, I was like, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. This is not where I belong. And I left there and kind of looked at a number of other things, spending a lot of time gardening, of course, because that's where I really ground myself, and it's always been a hobby. And, at that point, sort of the internet was becoming the web. And I was given some opportunities from some of the people I'd worked with in publishing to help kind of bring along some sites. So there's a really old internet site called The Well. And if people know the old school, The Well was kind of a message board community. It's like Facebook before there was Facebook, in a way. And they wanted to go from this kind of chat room space to having web content. So they actually hired me to do research in basically being a search engine. I went out and culled through what existed in the web then to find the best content in topics and to build out their different topic areas. And so that's sort of how I got involved in the internet in the beginning, was with this group called The Well. And then from there worked with search engines and moved on from there. But I was always going back to the garden. I was always in it. I was always getting my hands dirty. You know, when I finished school at UCSB, the first thing I did was moved home because I didn't know what I was going to do. It was summer. And the first thing I did then was I went out in the backyard and started cleaning up my parents' garden. And my dad was like, "What are you doing? Why are you out here?" And I'm like, "I can think here. I can find myself again here." And so no matter what I do and where I end up, I'm always coming back to the garden. You know, I'll be honest, weeding is not my favorite chore. Some gardeners absolutely love it, but it's not my favorite passion in there. But yeah, so I didn't always love it. I mean, I guess I did. I always loved nature. I always loved connecting to nature. You know, I was the kid that would jump up out of bed as soon as the sun was up and I'd run out, and we lived on a farm with a forest. I'd run out into the forest and get under the trees and just sit on the moss and just, I guess I was meditating. I didn't know what it was, but you know, I was just out there in it. But then I'd get called back and get told to, you know, mow an acre by hand, or, you know, pull weeds and pick peas that I hated to eat, lima beans, not my favorite. I was conflicted about it. And I was raised in a household that said, you know, go to college, get a career, work in an office, climb the ladder, and all of these things. So I was always a little conflicted about it because I had these different perspectives that I was given, but directions I was also given that I had a hard time really coming around to understanding that, you know, there are ways to turn a passion, which for me is gardening, into something you can make into a job and a career and you can love. You know, I also love cooking, and I thought for a while about becoming a chef. And as you know, as a restaurant owner, that's really hard work. And it's different than hosting dinner parties, even if it's a supper club kind of a thing where it's a small controlled group. You know, you get into a production kitchen and oh my gosh, you got to move fast and it's hard work and you're getting burned and you're cutting yourself and all these things. And I was like, I'm going to destroy something I love if I follow that as a career. But with garden coaching and garden design and working to connect people to nature, I've never felt that way. I've never felt like I'm going to ruin something by empowering others to do what I do and to find their own connection. To me, that builds me up as well.
How did that experience, you know, really formulate your thought process on media and technology?
I learned so much at Real Networks, you know, about myself, about technology. I was originally hired as a designer for the film.com part of Real Networks. And I went into some meetings. I think it might have been around some of the streaming we did of the Oscars. We did live Oscar coverage. And I went to a meeting there and I met the Media Lab people, and they were pushing audio and video. And I was like, that's where I want to be. I want to learn that. That's why I am here. I'm not here about building static websites. I am here because I want to be a part of this media revolution. Today, we take it for granted that we can just, you know, flip on our iPad and watch streaming media, or I can go and record an audio video presentation pretty quickly and throw it up on Vimeo. But Real Networks made Vimeo possible, you know, and Real Networks made Netflix possible. I mean, some of us may not know that today. We may not look back on it and realize that, but the work that we were doing in, you know, covering the Oscars with commentary and with streaming Bumbershoot live, you know, all these things, you know, and being a part of all of that, I just kind of felt like I grew up with media through that. And I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it really inspired me. It made me realize that you can pioneer anything. If you have an idea and you pursue it, you can really pioneer anything. And that's what we were doing there.
Real networks really did start out as a way to make access to, information ubiquitous, right? And we talk a lot about that now, like where, it's like, how do we come up with ways to level the playing field and give everybody access to technology? And obviously, access to broadband and different ways to access it. But back in those days, you were still plugging a phone jack into the wall.
With Bumbershoot, I was in this stadium level concert outdoors. We had this barricade area. I had to stand on a plastic chair and somehow hold a giant video camera steady so that you could see the video in your tiny dial up space. It was insane, and I've got my director and my producer yelling in my ear, hold it steady, hold it steady. And the whole crowd is like shaking the barricade. So the chair I'm standing on, there's no way, and it's Motorhead. And so it's just like, there's no way I can hold it steady. But, that was so invigorating and so cool, and then we'd come back and be like, what worked? What didn't work? How do we make it work better next time? And that's what Real Networks was all about. We were constantly trying to improve. And you're right, we didn't get everything right, but didn't we work with some smart people? Holy cow.
When did you decide to leave and why?
So my passion is creating things and testing them and breaking them. In technology, you have a development team and you have a QA team and all the sales and marketing and everything. But I always kind of fell on this weird cusp because I wasn't QA. I was kind of always tasked with, here's the technology, here's the problem a client might have, see if we can build it, and I loved that. And I loved doing the live events and being a part of that. But I was always going back to the garden and I was always grounding myself and doing all of these things. And at that point, many of our colleagues were buying their first homes. And so my friends at work were like, hey, you're a gardener. And I'm like, oh, you can tell, dirty fingernails, right? And they're like, can you come help me? I don't know how to garden. So I was like, oh, yeah, I guess. So I sort of started playing with that as a hobby. And I realized I really liked it. I also realized that I had a lot of gaps in my knowledge. And I also was realizing that things were changing at Real Networks. And that I kind of went from doing all this taking and breaking and building to doing types of jobs that really weren't my passion. And because of that, I didn't want Real Networks to become something I didn't love anymore. I didn't want to walk away from it and say, God, that was awful. Someone said to me, don't ever find yourself in a position that you're running away from something, always be running to something. And so I was sort of at that crossroads, and I really did have an epiphany one day out in the pouring rain on a Sunday, pulling weeds, not my favorite gardening job. And it just dawned on me. I was like, people make jobs out of this. People do this. Maybe I could do this. And so then it was a long heart to heart with my husband, who's been my rock and super supportive and has stayed in technology all these years. He worked at Real Networks too. And I started exploring schools because I knew that if I wanted to make it a job, I needed to fill in some gaps. And so all of that just sort of came together for me. And I enrolled in about a 1-year program at what was then called Lake Washington Technical College. And at that point, it had a horticulture program that was pretty focused and rapid, which is what I wanted. I already had a 4-year degree. I didn't want to go back to that. And so I enrolled in that and went through that program. The program at that point had been around for 25 years. And the same instructor, Don Marshall, a hero in the local industry. And when I went to school, it was like, okay, what do I want to be? Well, we'd study soil scientists. I'm like, I'm going to be a soil scientist. And then we'd study botany. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be a botanist. Then we'd study native plants. I'm like, I'm going to be a native plant person. Then we'd study trees. I'm like, I'm going to be an arborist. But it always then would circle back. And I'd be like, no, I want to work with people in their gardens. I want to empower people. I believe that every Black thumb has the potential to become a green thumb. As I went through school, I also started really recognizing, and this also came out of working with colleagues at Real Networks, there was a real gap in the industry at that point between the DIY consumer and the DIFM, the do it for me, And to be a DIYer, you need lessons and you need to learn. And so as I kept coming back to that, that's where the idea of garden mentors really started bubbling up. Today, a lot of people take it for granted that you can jump on YouTube and very quickly learn how to do something. That didn't exist then, and you could go to school, but not everybody had the time or the interest in going full on to school to learn that. And not everybody wanted to go take a class on a Sunday somewhere else about a general pruning thing. So my idea became, why can't I bring the lesson to the people where they garden, which is at home? And so that became kind of the groundwork for getting me into doing what I do and not running away from Real Networks, but running to my passion.
Well, that's just so inspiring. A lot of, whether it's students or people or women entrepreneurs of groups I'm part of, and people wanting to take that step, it's really just actually believing in yourself and taking the step and really like going internally and going, what do I love? How do I bring that to life? Isn't it?
I get told a lot that people admire me for doing this. And I'm like, well, it's a leap of faith. And I didn't do it alone. I had support. Having a support network really matters because anytime you start a new business or pivot a business, it's going to not pay you a ton of money in the beginning, probably. And it might if you're really good at it, really fortunate, but you might need a partner or a team or a women's group like you were mentioning to support you. And having that support group, it's so incredibly important. And then the other thing I think a lot of people struggle with is giving themselves the freedom to really open themselves up to what their passion is. That's something I hear a lot is, how did you decide to do it? How did you decide what you were going to do? And it's like, well, I just knew this was my passion. And people are like, well, I don't know what my passion is. And to me, that's unfortunate because I think we get caught up in the fear of staying put as opposed to saying, okay, what do I really want? Because we only get one life. So we might as well go out and just, hit it hard and get the most we can out of it.
What gave you that confidence? Like, what team members did you feel you had behind you to at least get started with Garden Mentors?
Well, Bob, my husband, 100%. He's been my biggest supporter and advocate and everything else. My technologist, as time's gone by, he's always been there for me. Quite a few colleagues at Real Networks, not just the people that had me come work in their garden, but people that knew me as somebody that likes to go out and take things apart and put them back together and those sorts of things. My parents, although my father in the beginning wasn't super excited that I was going to leave this career I'd built to go become a gardener, although he's definitely come around to it and is very happy about it. You and your firm and your teammates, I mean, you guys have helped me through some really rough times. As you well know, I spent a lot of time in the very beginning of Garden Mentors actually trying to get the message out about this existing business I was trying to build in garden coaching because people didn't really know it was out there. It wasn't really being sold. And it's a blessing and a curse once you get the message out there, because then trademark infringement can start happening and and then you get to hire a lawyer and thank God you're there. But all of those things have been really important to me. My colleagues at the Northwest Flower and Garden Show, oh my goodness, took a chance on me and let me come and be a speaker there. And that was actually after I had worked for a couple of local businesses in the industry, like Falling Water Designs. They were huge advocates for me and supported me in learning about the industry, and actually working through them got me the opportunity to be on HGTV for Landscapers Challenge. So there are all these just different avenues that are out there. And one of the really cool things that Rick from Falling Water Design said to me when I was working with him, and when I was also doing my side gig, right, my garden mentor side gig in the very beginning, I said, well, do you worry about the competition? And he said, no. He said, my perspective is that my slice of the pie doesn't get any smaller. The pie just gets bigger the more we're doing good work together. And that has stuck with me, and it's helped me want to help other people build their businesses, because the more we all do and the more positive impact we all have, whether it's on the planet or with other people or those things together, the better we all become.
Next week, I'll continue my conversation with Robin, where we will dive deeper into her business Garden Mentors, her advice for those looking to start gardening, and of course, what makes her a badass. Thank you for listening to The Lawyer Who Rocks. If you've enjoyed it and want to hear more from business badasses, make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. While you're at it, please give us a review. It really helps us grow the show. The Lawyer Who Rocks is produced by Sean Fox and HMLG. If you've got an idea for a podcast, you can find Sean online at sfpodcast.com. A big thank you to Aaron Jones for our theme music, to Jeff Gilbert at Hairball Media for our awesome artwork, and thanks to my entire team at HMLG. If you need a lawyer who rocks, find us at hmlglaw.com. On the next episode,
we talk about success. Some people are like, oh, it's all about the money. And I'm like, no, I don't chase the money. I chase the empowerment I can give to other people.
This podcast has been brought to you by HMLG. If you need lawyers who rock, visit us on our website at hmlglaw.com, or be sure to follow us on social media at HMLG or at The Lawyer Who Rocks on all social media platforms. The good news is we're not actually filming the podcast, so